What's up, everyone? This is Corey P. We got Britt from the block.
What's
We
good?
got Rozzo. We got
Hey,
Rach.
y'all. Hey.
And this is Breaking Bread. How y'all doing?
Great.
Y'all good? Y'all ready to break bread?
Yeah.
Let's
All right,
do
what we
it.
talking about today?
Triggers. Since our last episode, we was talking about highs and lows, and at the end, we was talking about triggers.
Yeah.
So here we go.
We thought it'd be good to cover this by itself.
Yeah, I think it's good because a lot of times we don't think about like moments, the reason why we kind of acted out. Like I had an issue with it. Like I'm, former behavior trainer, and we had this kid, right? And
We looked at you like, what?
He was.
Okay.
And so we had this particular kid where at a certain time he always act out. Like, and I mean having a good day, everything's going. And so like around after lunchtime, right after lunch, he act out. So they try to figure out what is this trigger? What is causing him to just respond? He's nonverbal, so he can't really tell you what's going on. And so we had to go in and like just watch. Like, is it certain foods he's eating? Is because he's still hungry? Like, what is it?
Right.
And so we could figure out everything we did today. We did everything. And so the next time we asked the teacher, tell us, what do you do when you come from lunch? And she said, she said, I go wash my hands when I walk in. And she said, after I wash my hands, I put lotion on. All right, so it's like, okay, next time, let's start breaking it down. Don't wash your hands, but don't put lotion on. Right. Well, found out the scent in the lotion was a trigger. That smell, for whatever his senses sometimes are heightened. And when she come in to try to work with him,
He's like, get away.
yeah, but he can't. So it was a trigger for him, and what kind of hit, like when we think about how many as adults we have these triggers, but sometimes we don't even know it's a trigger, and we act out in life, or use example, if someone try to love you but you can't trust them, and so when that person even show you any type of love, you kind of like spaz out, and you don't even know that it's a trigger somewhere that's causing this. And I remember Vonza was telling me one time when we first met, she was like, it was hard to, when you came along and you was doing nice things, because I'm thinking like how most guys trying to do, they trying to get, like, so it was like a trick, like, I'm pushing you away, nah, what's going on, and now allowing you to be in, or now allow myself to open up to you. And I was like, wow, man, like how many people have triggers like that and won't even know it.
Yeah. Well, I think there's one that I thought of in particular whenever you were talking about, like, as a child and then into adulthood. Like, and this is no fault to my mom because I know she meant well whenever she was doing this. But whenever I would have, like, sleepovers or, like, people over and they were supposed to get there at 6 o'clock, right? Well, 6:15 rolls around and she would say, hey, are they still coming? She put that doubt in my head that just because they were running 15 minutes late that they may not show up at all.
Yeah.
And so what she was trying to do was she was trying to let me know that, hey, it's okay. Some people, may not always show up for you, that kind of stuff. And, to be kind of aware of who treats you a certain way and who wants you around and stuff like that. And that's what she was trying to teach me. But for me, it was, are people gonna not come through for me? I'm having this party and it starts at 6 and no one's shown up by 6:10, 6:15. She's like, is anybody coming? So that makes me doubt, okay, does anybody even like me? Do I even really have friends? Stuff like that. And so as I got older, whenever my birthday comes around, I'm really bad about saying I don't want to do anything because I'm afraid nobody will come through for me, right? And so, I realized that after, time with God and stuff like that that's a trigger for me. Is whenever the spotlight is put on me, I'm afraid nobody's going to come through because of something that started whenever I was a kid.
Is that still a challenge for you?
Yeah, it's still challenging. I work through it because I understand what it is now. And if people want to do nice things for me, I have to trust that they're going to come through and do what they say they're going to do. It's still a trigger, though.
Yeah.
Well, the last episode I talked about, my brother's transition, our brother's death, and how I was having a great day, and then I get a phone call that he was currently dying, and it left a trigger for me. I didn't realize it was a trigger until 4 months later. I'm smiling in my car, listening to music, having a good day on my way to work, and then I catch myself smiling, and I realize like, oh, let me just prepare myself just in case something else happens. So I found myself doing that quite a bit after he died. And for me personally, I had to remind myself in those moments, like, I can be happy. Things can be good. Like in the moment when I have that trigger,
right.
I have to remember again, God is not going to play with me like that. God's not gonna, this is not God, basically. And, I'd have to correct that. But so that was one trigger that I mentioned before, but I'm gonna go a little deep.
Okay.
Let's go a little deep. So before Christ, I had a pornography and masturbation addiction. Right. It's a long story, stemmed from being molested as a child, that opened the door of sex, and then, it just increased over time.
Yeah.
And it ended up being pornography and masturbation because in high school, women always said that I was promiscuous, and I wasn't. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to be the opposite of what they say. So they say I'm promiscuous. I'm not going to be promiscuous. But I still had this urge. So that's how I turned to masturbation and pornography. And it was great at first because can't get yourself pregnant. You can't, all this type of stuff. Whatever. But seriously, that's what people think. They say you can't get yourself pregnant, can't get yourself an STD. You're not adding no more bodies. Like, what's wrong with it?
Right.
Well, it turned into an addiction and I couldn't stop. And then I ended up meeting Christ because of it. And afterwards, I knew that was something I had to let go. Can't, it's just not right. I can't be watching porn, lusting, and feeding that part of my flesh. Well, in my walk with letting that go, I'll be doing great, right? And then all of a sudden, I just slip and go down a real slippery slope.
Right.
And now I'll be back in it every day like I was before.
Right.
And then I would be good. And then, after I'm good, I get back out of it. I refocus, renew my mind. I'm good. And then a little bit down the line, here it goes again. I didn't realize that it was kind of like a cycle, right? So there was a trigger, but I didn't know that there was a trigger. And there's actually a couple of triggers attached to that because there was a couple of different reasons why that even came about. But I realized that if I am like struggling with something else in my life, like PCOS, for example.
Right.
If I'm doing everything right, eating healthy, doing everything good, and it's not working, I give up. And when I give up,
self-sabotage.
It's like a self-sabotage. If I'm really trying to do right and it's just not working, then I just give up and I just go all in with that. So I realized that a trigger for that is me failing in other areas. But then I realized, like, why would I turn to something else that sabotaged me? And then it dawned on me that when I was masturbating and watching porn initially, it was to escape from being molested.
Right.
And so I realized that even though that's a very horrible, it's self-sabotaging thing to do. It used to comfort me before I even knew who God was. It was an escape from reality. And so I realized now as an adult, it took some time to figure it out, but I realized, like, if I ever tried to escape from reality, escape from things that are going wrong, I would turn to that. And so now that I knew that it was a trigger that I didn't even know was there,
right.
Now when things are going wrong, I can maneuver differently.
Yeah.
I realize, like, okay, I'm starting to feel myself getting overwhelmed. Things are not going right. Let me make sure I go to wise counsel or go to somebody else instead of retreating back to something that's actually hurting me even more.
Right.
Yeah.
So
That's good.
Man.
And, for me, I struggle with the same thing you struggled with. And I had triggers. It's different. I wasn't molested or anything like that growing up. But for me, it was a little different because I didn't want, me and Bonza was actually dating. And of course, Bonza was a virgin. She wanted to wait till marriage. For me,
I know you lying.
excuse me, had a yawn, guys. Had a yawn. So she wanted to wait till marriage, and so when I went off to college, I didn't want, like, I really love Vonza, right? And people know the story. Of course, we didn't wait till marriage, but I only been with Vonza, and she only been with me. And so when I was out in school, shoot, you know, we're away, from
Right.
each other.
It was
So
on.
in my mind, the only way for it to for me to be a good man is to go that route, right? But it also became a comfort because like moments like things got challenging moments, you know what I'm saying? You go back to that thing.
Facts.
And so it was hard because it seemed like it was right. Like, I mean, I'm a good dude. I only
Right.
been with one woman. And I
Right.
feel like, well, I'm using that. I'm not saying I was saying that to myself, but most people would say that. You're a good dude. You only been with this one woman. You ain't cheating on her.
Right.
But I'm cheating on God.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
But you didn't look at that
I
that way
didn't
at
see
first.
Yeah, because I'm looking from a natural perspective, right?
Right.
And so from a natural perspective, it's like, man, I'm doing right. And so if inside in your mind you're doing right, even when you give your life to Christ, it becomes still a challenge because you never looked at it as that's something negative.
Yeah.
And you looked at it like, shoot, it helped my relationship.
Right.
I ain't gonna be with no other woman.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so we gotta realize and figure out those triggers because when you know those triggers, you know what to do at that time. Matthew says, keep watch and pray so that you will not give into temptation, for the spirit is willing, but the body is weak. And so in that moment when your body get weak, you got to go to that spirit. You need to put something in place when you know those triggers. And one thing I put in place, man, I just started admitting to it. Like I ain't never admit that to my wife because I thought she was, or my girlfriend or fiance, whatever that during that time. I never wanted to say that to her. You know what I mean? Because it's like, man, I ain't finna tell her this. I don't want her to look at me. And
What,
Vaughn-
that you had an addiction?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Yvonne's was like this. She always had God first, and it was like I wanted that. I knew where God was taking me, but I still had my struggles. Like I was away. She was kind of sheltered, but I'm in college. I'm doing all type of things. You know what I mean? I'm seeing all type of things.
Yeah.
But her prayers, I didn't want her to see me in that light. So the moment I did it, she became my accountability partner.
Yeah.
And then the moment I admitted to the world, that was through preaching. Man, well, it felt like a weight.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I was like, oh Lord, man, hey guys, this is a challenge I dealt with. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so from there, I was able to now keep watch and pray. And so certain things in life, it's certain things you can't do. So like shows, like say if it's a show that it's not even a point of, nowadays, I mean,
There's porn and everything.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's
yeah,
some
everything.
porn in it.
But it's
Well,
not meant to be.
yeah, it's not
Right.
meant to be porn.
But it's a
Yeah.
trigger for you.
Yeah, but it's a trigger, so I can't watch that.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like other people might see, and that might be. I mean, I ain't not. Yeah, I mean, some people can watch a show and be like, man, that ain't nothing.
Yeah.
Like for me, I can't watch that. It's
Yeah.
a trigger for me. So
Yeah.
why put myself in that situation?
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think that's another thing. That's why the Bible said, keep watch and pray. You got to watch what you're doing,
Right.
Because that could be triggering something else and leading you down the wrong path. So one of the tips that I always give people, man, watch and pray, man. And then honestly, you gotta even say out your mouth, no, I'm not gonna do this.
Right.
Yeah.
Like you gotta be like no, like I'm not doing this. I'm not gonna
Yep.
allow this in my household. I'm not gonna allow this in my family. Allow this to destroy because
Yeah.
eventually. The crazy thing about it is eventually you'll get to a place and you're like, man, Corey, a good dude. He only been with one. But me, if I keep doing that, if I was consistent doing that,
Right.
now I'm going to want to do it with
Yeah.
somebody.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it'll manifest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and like shame festers in the darkness, and so does sin. And so,
drops
Proverbs.
whenever you bring those things to light, as difficult as it may be, it starts to not even have a grip on you anymore.
yeah.
And even if you have to do it multiple times, and you have to have that accountability partner that you say, hey, whatever your trigger may be, hey, this is bothering me right now, and I know I'm going to revert back to whatever, action it was. Like, I need you right now to just talk me through this or whatever, and it's really helpful to have somebody there for that. I know another trigger that I had was that also stemmed from childhood was food. And I didn't realize it until I was trying to lose weight and didn't understand why I had such an addiction to food. Like I would, whenever I was a kid, I would run to my room and hide and eat snacks and stuff. My parents never told me that I couldn't, if I asked for, obviously if they're like, you can't have a little Debbie cake before dinner, right?
Yeah.
Like, but they never held food from me. They never kept food from me. But I would feel like I needed to hide whenever I wanted something that everyone else wasn't eating, right?
Yeah.
And then even when I got older, I would find myself hiding food that I was eating from people who didn't care, like my roommates. Like I would be like, they would be like, have you eaten today? I'd be like, no, because I would feel so much shame in the fact that I just was in my room indulging and binge eating because of some emotion that I had. And I realized that food brought me comfort from a young age.
Yeah.
My sister was born visually impaired, and so that took a lot out of my parents. They were constantly with her. She had surgeries, and I was, at this person's house staying the night while she was over. They flew here, flew there, whatever. They were taking care of my sister, and so I knew, especially when we stayed in our house, we had a little snack thing, and my parents put it Rachel level so that when Rachel needed a snack, she could go get one, and they didn't have to worry about it. Well, I found myself whenever I was at my house with somebody that I didn't know, they'd usually stay with me or I'd go to their house. That was something I knew was always there. I could always go to. And so I would go to it and get it. And, I would feel that sense of comfort. Well, then as I got older, it manifested into more things of any extreme emotion. So if I felt very happy, if I felt very sad, if I felt very excited, or if I was, angry or whatever, I would always go to food because I knew that would bring me back to a comfort zone.
Wow.
But I didn't know that until I started trying to dive in and figure out what it was. So now that I understand that, whenever I'm feeling any extreme emotion, my brain goes, you should probably eat something. And I'm like, no, I should do this. So I try to find myself celebrating happy things in other ways other than food. Or whenever I'm sad, I don't keep things in my house that will trigger me to just indulge like I used to. Because if it's there, I'm going to eat it kind of deal. So I had to realize and go back to my childhood and figure out, why do I turn to that every time something either really, really high or really, really low happens to me?
So there was some commonality in some of the stuff that everybody said that caught my attention. And it seems as though these triggers, period, form when there's some type of traumatic event or something negative. Mm-hmm. A lot of times, we can even include you, because the having sex outside of marriage is not good. You know what I mean? So anytime it didn't look like it was bad in the moment, but anytime there's like a bad, traumatic, or negative thing, it seemed as though everybody tries to find something to comfort them during that time, right? Mm-hmm. Most of the time, it seems like, in just about most of the cases that I've heard, it happens when people don't necessarily have a strong relationship with God. Like, God's not the first place they turn, right? So they're turning to natural stuff, food, sex, alcohol, drugs, whatever have you. You turn to these things to try to comfort yourself in these moments. And they do comfort. Let's be real. Yeah. They do, but it's temporary. It's not it's not going to withstand anything. It's actually killing you and hurting you behind the scenes, and you don't even realize it. So we get comfortable doing drugs, watching porn, eating food, all this stuff, because it feels good and makes you feel safe and comforted in that moment. But then later, it's destructive. And so it's like this nasty cycle where you're craving this comfort and this hope and this, in those moments, but it's destructing you, but you need that hope. And so I think that, when it comes to, even with me, with my brother's death, that was a trigger because it could have been bad. It could have been a trigger that turned bad. You know what I mean? I could have turned to other things. Right. But I think now that we're saved, and for people who are not saved, I think, well, of course you need to get saved first, but I think these are the times where God comes into play the most, right? He's there to comfort us when we need comforting, be hope for us, and we can turn to him. It seems like we should turn to these natural things, but there's longevity with him. You know what I mean? It's not temporary, and it doesn't cost us anything. Eating costs you your health. Porn costs us a whole bunch of type of stuff. Drugs cost you a whole bunch of stuff. And when you're with God and you're just worshiping and you're allowing the word to heal you and allowing God to comfort you, there's only healing that comes after that. There's no negative parts to it. So I think, when it comes to these triggers, I think the biggest thing is, before, we didn't know what to turn to. You know what I'm saying? Now we know what to turn. We know what to turn to. You know what I'm saying? And so now I think, like how my brother just transitioned and I'm in God, now I know when I do have a trigger, I know what to turn to, which is God, instead of the bad stuff. So I think now the biggest key with the other stuff is mind renewal. It's just knowing, like, okay, Pastor says all the time, we've lived with our sinful self for so long that we're just used to kind of doing stuff that
Yeah.
way. But if you do mind renewal and you remind yourself, hey, this is destructive.
Yeah.
This goes against what God says. This goes
Yep.
against his word. I need to replace this with something else. Because
Yeah.
if you take something away out your life, you have to replace it with
Replace it,
something.
yeah.
And so, you got to learn how to, okay, maybe when you feel uncomfortable or whatever, maybe you're listening to worship music
Yeah.
instead of eating. When you want to, watch porn, maybe you surround yourself with people. You can't masturbate when there's other people in the room. You know what I'm saying? I'm just saying, let's just be real.
It's true,
You know what I'm
yeah.
saying? Somebody feels like doing drugs or smoking weed or having alcohol. Maybe, you go chill with your kids because you're not going to do drugs when you're around your kids. Okay, well, you know what I mean, but
Okay,
you have
not
to
Russ.
okay, bad example. But you have to replace it with something
Something you
else,
gotta put, yeah.
so
Right.
that way you don't fall back into that trap.
Yeah.
And you have to speak truth over yourself and realize that if you fulfill yourself physically, that doesn't fulfill you spiritually.
That's it.
And that is ultimately the issue that you have is that it's temporary. You're gonna have
Right.
to keep coming back to that. You're gonna have to keep coming back. You're gonna have to keep coming back.
Yeah.
Because if you realize the addiction comes from repeating it, it's a repetitive action. And so whenever that high dies off, you got to go get another one, and then
It gets
that one dies,
worse
and it gets
and
worse.
deeper.
Yeah, and then you get to the point where you feel kind of like you're spiraling out of control.
Yeah.
And that's not a fruit of the spirit.
Yeah.
Self-control is. And
Yeah.
so whenever you kind of feel yourself in these actions, you really some things I like to think is, am I being patient? Am I being kind? Am I going through that kind of stuff? And if I go no to one of them, I'm like, I'm not operating the fruit of the spirit. Don't need to be doing this.
Yeah.
And it is that mind renewal, because at first, whenever I first started trying to do things my way, I wasn't renewing my mind, and I was just trying to do things the way that I wanted to do them, and it wasn't working.
Yeah.
And
Never
then
does.
and then whenever I inserted God into the situation, people kind of look at me funny whenever they're like, "Well, when did you really start, getting, being successful on your weight loss journey?" And I was like, "When I allowed God to take control." And they're like, "No, but like what did you do?" And I was like, "No, whenever I let God take control of it." And they're like, "Oh, okay." But that's because He's the only one that could help me not lean on my food addiction.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it on my own because it wasn't working when I was trying to.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you had to. I think the thing too, what I noticed about people, I think where they got to a place where they don't want to deal with the trigger, so then they become another person.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like you see somebody like, you got to accept me how I am, but you got a bad attitude. Like, and I see people walking around sometimes, they got this mean mug face on. I think it's because they don't want to deal with the trigger. They don't want to deal with these different things, so they become another person.
Or they just accept it and say, "This me."
This
you
me.
gonna have to.
Yeah, you got to accept it.
And
Yeah.
it's not you.
Yeah, it's not
you because you been through a traumatic experience.
That's
It's
it.
not really you.
Yeah. So I think you got to get to a place that in life that certain things you're gonna have to master. You know, it might not just leave. Like it's certain desires, that I did in the world when I got saved. It just haven't never thought about it. But it's some things that I actually have to master. Now it's some things that you got to put in place, and you can't be afraid. So one of the things that I think, again, I talked about it earlier, you need to recognize and pray and watch. That's Matthew 26:41, and the next one is submit to God. Rachel talked about that from that perspective. James says, humble yourself before God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. A lot of times we're not resisting, we're accepting it. Like, come on in. We're inviting them in. And then I think you also need to stay accountable and have a mentor and somebody you can talk to, someone that you can ask hard questions. And Proverbs 11:14 says, without wise leadership, a nation falls. Therefore, safety is having many advisors. And so I think that a lot of times we try to do everything on our own. But when we invite other people in that can hold us accountable, you can check me. You know what I'm saying? Now, when I was in college or whatever, I wasn't talking to nobody that couldn't check me. She didn't know I needed help in that. But now she know, she gonna check. Like, what you doing? You know what I'm saying? Like, you need that person to check you. And even friends. Now I tell I don't mind sharing my story. And I think the last thing, you need to change your lifestyle, create new habits and new. I think a lot of y'all talked about that, new ways of doing things. And 2 Corinthians 5:17 says, "This means that anyone who belongs to Christ has become a new person. The old life is gone and a new life has begun." And you got to get to that place that you're a new person. You're not that person. That those things have passed away. So I encourage you. These are some tips that I utilize in my life to avoid these triggers.
I do want to say, I don't think that triggers are necessarily a bad thing. In James 1:2, it says, "When trouble of any kind comes your way, consider an opportunity for great joy. For you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. So let it grow. For when your endurance is fully developed, you'll be perfect and complete, needing nothing." Right?
Yeah.
So when these triggers come, that's an opportunity for you to exercise in that area.
Yeah.
Like you said. So you can exercise your faith, and you can look at it like, instead of like, man, I'm still tempted with lust, man, I still want to watch porn, man, I still want to do drugs. It's not necessarily a bad thing because we're flesh.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? We're never going to be perfect in this world. So when that time comes, that's an opportunity. That's actually a good thing. That's an opportunity. Well, you can look at it as a good thing.
Yeah.
You can look at this as, okay, this is an opportunity for me to choose God, for me to do the right thing.
Yeah.
Because I like to explain this to kids usually. But, you have your spirit man and you have your flesh man.
Yeah.
Whichever one you feed is going to grow.
Yeah.
And so when it comes time for them, when you have those battling moments, if you've been feeding your flesh with food, with porn, with sex, with drugs, with whatever it is, stealing, pride, anything, if you feed your flesh, your spirit, you're not putting nothing in your spirit, it's weak. And so you're gonna fall into those temptations. But if you feed your spirit with the word consistently, especially in the area that you're weak, no matter what it is, get some scriptures and feed your spirit, man. When it comes time, when you're tempted and that trigger comes, and you're in that moment, your spirit man is gonna hold you down in that moment.
Yeah, and I think too, like sometimes it's not an easy moment to get yourself out of that, mindset or thought pattern or something like that. Like sometimes I will literally have to, like if I'm on my couch, I will literally get up and start doing something, anything. Other than what I wanted to do, because like Corey and Brittany, like I've also had that struggle with pornography and stuff. So like getting up and moving out of that location where you're having those thoughts will help as well. Surrounding yourself with people that
It's always when you're isolated.
right are like-minded. But like literally, like I even think about times, the other day I was having a really bad day, and so whenever I had gotten home, I literally was like, I want to go and just get some ice cream and just sit on my couch. And I was like, nope. I got up and I started cleaning because it got my mind off of it. I turned on some music and I just started cleaning, because it was in that moment that I was sitting there, that I was isolated, that I was still, that it was quiet. And I had already had a really bad day, that the enemy just crept right in and was like,
a little sucker.
yeah. He was like, hey.
He doesn't play fair.
No, he doesn't. He will kick you when you're down 1,000,000 times.
Not a square. I'm playing.
I will fight you.
Man, I think it was a good episode right here. I enjoyed talking the triggers and talking about it, and sharing it. I just want to let y'all know, anytime y'all, going through anything, Rachel, Roz, Britt from the block, I'm here to support and pray for you all. And if y'all just want to vent, I don't never want y'all to feel like y'all alone.
Oh, okay then.
So I'm that.
I'm over here trying
See,
to
I was
think
trying
about
to-
what's my triggers. That's what I've been sitting talking about the whole time.
You was
Thinking about
what?
it, yeah.
Think about what?
What's my triggers? I was just thinking while y'all was talking.
Oh, you think you have some? Oh, you can
Probably.
think of that?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I think if somebody didn't know what their triggers were, I think if you find yourself doing repeated behavior, like destructive behavior, so like these temporary things that make you feel good in the moment, but they're really not good for you. Even if it's lashing out at people,
Right.
if it's cussing folks out, if it's fighting, there's
Right.
lots of stuff.
Like
But if
in your
you-
moment of weakness, what is your first reaction? Like
yeah, I
that's-
think that's how you can decipher what your trigger is.
And
like,
sometimes, and for me, sometimes it is going straight to God. Like that is, and as I've grown through understanding my triggers, that is my first reaction. But I have to think about those moments where it isn't. What is my first? What do I turn to first?
Yeah.
like if you find yourself like, you're always doing something negative that you don't want to do, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, why did I do that? If I'm trying to stay away from, alcohol, why did I just pick up this beer? why am I doing this? And then you just peel it back piece by piece to figure out. Just like how Corey said with the lotion, you know, the boy was acting out. Why is he acting out? That's not normal behavior. And then you have to peel back the layers to figure out it's something as simple as lotion.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So it might take a little bit of time, but it's self-reflecting.
It is.
You have
and
to,
I think we need to do that. I think a lot
Yeah.
of times in life we don't. And that's what when I started, I said a lot of people don't even know they have triggers.
Yeah.
So you know, but the good thing is to kind of start going back to like what Brittany's saying, kind of peeling these things back and figuring out. So that was a great point you made, Roz, because I think some people don't know that and they acting out. But if they knew that was a trigger, now they can put something in place
right.
to help that area of their life. So hope.
Cool.
Yeah, I enjoyed it, man. Y'all enjoyed it.
Yeah.
This is the one topic you chose, and it was great.
What? Oh man, see, we got people. See, is that a
You know,
compliment?
We had to just,
See, I'm always
throw a
getting
little
picked
jokey
on,
joke in
guys.
there.
I'm getting bullied here on the show.
Oh yeah, whatever.
Did you talk about bullying next?
Oh yeah. All right, guys, this is Breaking Bread. I'm Corey P. We got
your
Britt
voice
from the
just
block,
cracked.
and we got Rozzo. We got Rach. Don't listen to Brittany. I'm out.
See y'all later.